Hey, hi guys. Tuesday afternoon and a little bit of biology. So welcome to those of you out in live stream land, and for those of you who are watching this on catch up, so to speak, hopefully this will be useful for you as well. So we're following on from last week's live stream where I talked about motivation. And how do we make that kind of feeling of, oh, yes, I'm going to go for this, into daily actions? So let's have a look. So a little bit of a plug, first and foremost, to my ex-student, Jade Bowler, otherwise known as Unjaded Jade, who has written, I have to say, an absolutely fantastic study guide. And I'm now looking to see where my copy is. Here we go. Here I have read it. Really excellent, bringing all the science into how studying actually needs to happen, as well as taking into account things like perfectionism and mental health and timetabling and all of those things. Really useful book. So this has been a little bit of inspiration, but I'm also including a whole load of my own thoughts as well here. So here we're talking about from understanding why you're working and reminding yourself, that's a little bit to do with what I talked about last week, to trying to make work happen more easily every day. Translating that kind of feel-good feeling from, maybe going to visit the university of your dreams and really knowing that that's where you want to go. How does that translate? How does that get translated into some reasonable work ethic on a day-to-day basis? And we're going to talk about how making activities that you want to do routines, or ideally habits, because that is how motivation is translated, is by starting to get yourself into some routines so that you're not having to think too much about what you're doing or when you're doing it. It's just kind of like, okay, it's 5 o'clock, I'm going to sit down and do half an hour's work, for example. So from motivation from last week, we're just going to do a tiny quick recap, understanding what motivation is. It's all about getting to know and self-reflection. Why are you doing the A-levels that you are doing? And why do you want the grades that you have set yourself as the target? And you need to think this through. You need to understand yourself. Is it about proving something to yourself or to other people? Or is it about getting into that dream university or that other course that you want to do? Work out what it is that is actually propelling you along. Really important that you understand kind of where you're at in this. So I talked about last week making a future poster, and here's my little example. Me pretending that I'm wanting to do biology at Southampton University. Notice I've included social activities as well as parts of the course that really excite me. And the whole aim of putting these social activities or photographs in of the university is so that I can actually visualize myself being there, putting myself in that scenario, and therefore knowing that that is what is driving me along to carry on working. And notice on this poster, I've actually scrawled the pretend grades that I need to get into the course. And then you put that poster up above your desk, because then every time you sit down, it's going to be looking at you and reminding you about why you are about to start work. So other ways of doing it, other than making a poster, writing out why you're doing what you're doing on a post-it. Or here's another little idea that I had, is kind of making yourself a little 30-second TikTok video of why it is that you want to end up in a university doing a particular course. Video a message to yourself so that you can just replay it. It can't get much more authentic than you speaking to yourself about why you are working at that moment in time. So another little thought, just to kind of keep you going. But now we're talking about getting from that motivation to a more standard routine practice of getting work done each day. So quick plug for my website. I've got all of the videos that cover the whole of the AQA and the OCRA specifications on my website. And if you need both years 1 and 2, it's £100 to have them at your fingertips for the whole year, and actually to have me at your fingertips for the whole year, because just like on YouTube, you can write me little comments and I try very hard to get back to you, certainly within a day. And if I'm online at the same time as you, it might literally be within a few seconds. So that's about, depending on where you live, 2 or 3 hours worth of individual tuition. And you get, what is it, about 200 hours worth of teaching for that same money. If you just need year 12, it's £50 for the whole year. But because my whole aim is to make A-level biology accessible to every student, regardless of their family income, I wanted to give you a way of earning the money back. And let's face it, this is a win-win scenario. If friends of yours buy the videos through the link that I send you, you get 10% commission on them. You could even make a profit. But there's a freebie there as well, so do just go and look at that. It's worth checking it out just for that, hopefully. Anyway, back to getting from that motivation to having a routine or a habit. So first of all, what the heck is the difference between a routine and a habit? A routine is not automatic. It is deliberate. It is something that requires an element of discipline. You decide to do it, and therefore you get on with it. A habit, on the other hand, is automatic. Think about somebody who bites their nails. If they're slightly nervous, they'll end up biting their nails. They won't even know that they're doing it because it is automatic and subconscious. Something has occurred, a cue or a prompt has occurred to make them slightly stressed, slightly nervous, and therefore their go-to action without them thinking about it at all is to bite their nails. And for some reason, that gives them an air of calm. It helps. It gives them some kind of reward, some benefit. And that, therefore, reinforces that behavior. If they get nervous again, they bite their nails because somehow it makes them feel more in control. And therefore, that whole behavior is reinforced. So routines, easier to start, but easier to break. Habits, on the other hand, much harder to make something a habit where it is truly an automatic knee-jerk response, and much harder to break those habits. And of course, we can have good habits and we can have bad habits. We can have good routines and we can have bad routines. So this video is hopefully about encouraging you to make good routines, which might just become good habits, and also giving you some ideas at the end as to how to break those bad habits. Scrolling through social media, for example, there's a typical teacher's idea, but let's face it, I have the same issue myself. I get distracted. Now, understand that both of these routines and habits are initiated by cues or prompts, just like a prompter for people who are doing a play. Somebody loses their way, they get a little kind of helping hand, something to kind of get them going. Or a cue in a play is when something happens in a particular scene, and then that is the cue for somebody to come on or to speak something, for example. So both of these are initiated by cues or prompts, and both give a reward of some kind or other. So here is the cue. It leads to the action, biting nails, for example. And that leads to some kind of reward. Either, if you listen to last week's live stream, either an intrinsic reward coming from within, or an extrinsic reward, which is something that comes from the outside. Like, for example, having a sweet, or your teacher giving you praise, that kind of thing. Those are extrinsic rewards. Whereas intrinsic rewards are you feeling really good about what you've done. That's an intrinsic reward. So they're not necessarily, rewards are not necessarily concrete things, though they can be. They're often extrinsic. They can be feelings or a lack of guilt. So they can be either. And notice that this is a loop, because the reward means that when that cue happens again, you're more likely to do that action, which is going to give you the reward that therefore reinforces either the routine or the habit, depending on whether the action is something that is deliberate or whether it is automatic. So let's have a think about the scenario of an alarm clock going off at 6 o'clock in the morning so that somebody can get up to do some exercise. So the crucial thing here is that we're talking about the action, whether it is a routine or a habit. The cue for both of them, the routine, 6 a.m. alarm. For the habit, it is the alarm going off. The cue is the same for both things. The delineation, the differentiation between the action being either a routine or a habit is how automatic getting out of bed is. Okay, so for somebody where this is a routine, it's quite possible they'll hit the snooze button because it's actually the last thing they want to do, and they haven't quite managed to get that kick of discipline in, and who blames them, 6 o'clock in the morning, they might hit the snooze button. Whereas if somebody, it is a habit, they will get up immediately. Because, and this is actually me, when my alarm goes off in the morning, it also helps, let's be honest, that I'm a slightly morning person. When the alarm goes off, I will immediately get up because I am already visualizing my reward. I know what my reward is going to be, that I am going to get a few minutes on my own without anybody else up in the house. And that is a real reward to me. Probably extrinsic, but it's about a feeling, isn't it? So the reward for somebody, they only just get to their exercise or whatever on time, or maybe they don't, they only get part of their exercise done. But the reward is that something happens because they've got out of bed. The reward for somebody where it's a habit is, as I've just talked about, that kind of feeling like I've just had that little bit of moment in time to myself. It's a special time. It's something that really does something for me. Absolutely a reward. So the next time my alarm clock goes off, I'm more likely to just get out of bed automatically. Notice the difference, routine and habit. And I'm going to suggest to you that routine and habit, they're not distinct. They are actually on a continuum. Routine, absolute full-on discipline required. And gradually, as you go down the continuum towards it becoming a habit, it becomes less thought about, deliberated about, disciplined, and it becomes more automatic. It's just what happens whenever that cue occurs. And the cue can be a time, like an alarm going off. It can be a place. When you sit down at your workplace, okay, right, now it's time to work. Is it still a matter of deliberate, okay, I'm gonna do 10 minutes, or is it just automatic? I'm sitting at my desk, right, now it's time to work. You're not even thinking about it. It can be a particular group of people around you. It can be a particular thing that happened. And I'm now struggling to think of particular examples. So that we'd come back to the nail biting example, something that causes some kind of stress. You're going to have possibly have a habitual response to that rather than a routine response, maybe. So how do we get to making our work that we need to get done a routine or a habit? Well, here we go. Here, the crucial thing is to start kicking off with a routine. So, for example, let's say that up until now, you've never done any work until in the evening, until after tea has happened. But maybe actually you want to get into a routine of actually getting some work done between the time when you get home from school and tea time. And let's say you get home from school at 4 and tea generally happens at 6:30. So here we go. We could kind of go, you know, we're gonna try and get into a routine where we start work and we get some work done. So here, decide the cue. It might be a time. So here the crucial thing is that you make it realistic. So can I suggest to you that if you kind of go, oh, I've got between 4 and 6:30, can I suggest to you that you do not plan to do 2 hours work in the first instance, at least? If you're really starting a new routine, you've got to make it realistic and one that is actually reasonably achievable, so that actually you get that reward of feeling good about having achieved it at the end. So here the cue would be, let's say you say, okay, I'm going to get an hour's work done between 4 and 6:30. So maybe actually work starts at 5 and then it finishes at 6. So you've got an hour to kind of slob a bit, have a bit of telly, have something to eat, whatever. But 5 o'clock, and can I suggest possibly at 10 to 5, 5 to 5, you're starting to think, okay, I'm going to go and sit down and work now. Do I need to get anything else done? Do I want a cup of tea? If so, make it now. Don't do it at 5. Be at your desk at 5 o'clock. Discipline. It's deliberate. It's not automatic at the moment. And then, importantly, work out possibly what your reward is going to be. Now, you might choose to make it a very extrinsic reward. You might say, okay, at 6 o'clock, I am going to go downstairs and make myself another cup of tea and have a biscuit, if your mum lets you just before tea, up to her, you know. Or you might recognize that actually it's going to be a very definite intrinsic reward of feeling fantastic about it. And you could say then, actually, at 6 o'clock, between 6 and the time that tea happens, I'm going to go on social media. No guilt. Fantastic. But the reward needs to be something that you love. Or actually, you know, dare I say it, that you crave doing. Something that you really look forward to. Or it might be just saying to yourself, do you know, if I actually work until 6 and I manage to work until mum or dad calls me down for tea, I'm going to give myself a full hour for tea. Not kind of, you know, feeling like I have to do half an hour and get back up to work or whatever. Do you see? But think about what your reward is going to be and whether intrinsic is enough or whether you need a little bit of extrinsic reward help to actually get you started. So a couple of tips here. Oh, here we go. Right, a couple of tips before I say the one that has actually come up on the screen. Another little tip is my 10-minute rule. So if you're sitting down at your desk and you're kind of going, oh my goodness, I don't know, you know, quite what to get on with. Oh, another, I've even got two. One is, if you know exactly what you're going to get on with, 10-minute rule. Decide to do 10 minutes of solid, focused work, and maybe even make that 10 minutes, maybe 15 to really get into it. Because often by the time you've done 10 or 15 minutes work, you're in the groove, you're ready to carry on working. And actually you'll carry on working easily, relatively easily, way beyond that initial 10 or 15 minutes. The other way of getting yourself into work when you're just first sitting at your desk is actually the first job is writing a list of everything that you need to get done. And that includes non-work as well as work things. If you're parents and you know some jobs to do around the house or whatever, write down everything that you need to get done this evening, or that you want to start doing. And that would include all of your homework tasks, but some of those homework tasks may not have a deadline for another week or two, for example. And then when you look at your list, you then mentally start prioritizing, obviously the ones that have to be done for tomorrow, but also keeping and I'm going to talk about prioritization next week in the live stream, but also kind of mentally thinking, okay, if I've got a test next week, I actually want to start doing something tonight. So I want to allocate maybe 20 minutes to doing something this evening, so that you actually now have a list of things that you want to get on with. So now you're not thinking about what you've got to get on with, you just do it. So another great tip is, if you're trying to start a new routine or a new habit, is to actually attach the new routine to an old one. And particularly if the old routine is really well established. And this may have nothing to do with work. So, for example, Jade in her book, and I'm going to, give credit where credit's due, just thinking of the example that she used the whole habit that she had of making her bed, didn't require any thought process on her part. She used that time to perfect learning some of the standard definitions for her chemistry A-level exam. So use a point in the day where actually your brain is not involved in anything, that you could actually try and get some tricky things learnt by rote, because let's face it, nearly all subjects have stuff that needs to be learnt by rote. So attaching a new routine to an old, often either a very well-established habit, or even a very well-established routine, or even a habit. And then we get to the whole idea of this routine actually needs to be repeated. The only way that a routine becomes established and even possibly even becomes a habit is if repetition occurs. And that, of course, requires discipline. But remember those rewards. They're really important, either those extrinsic ones that you give yourself to feel better, or the intrinsic ones that just come from within because you're really feeling good about what you have got done, and therefore the ability of being able to do something, brainless, without feeling any guilt afterwards. Really important. Here's another little important thing. Notice it's not a great tip. This is important. This is, to quote flipping Frozen, let it go. If you miss days, if you don't get your hour work done between being at home and dinner time, don't get hung up about it. Literally let it go. Let it just pass you by and kind of go, okay, doesn't mean that I can't try again this evening. Okay. And if you come to the conclusion that it absolutely cannot work, you might have to rethink that element of the routine. Actually, if that is a time when the household is so busy and your parents are asking you for help and all the rest of it, you may need to rethink that bit of the routine. You might choose to get up early in the morning, especially if you're a morning person, and actually get an hour done before you start your morning routine to get ready for school. There's a radical idea. It's about understanding yourself. An awful lot of studying techniques are about understanding yourself and doing a whole load of self-reflection and being honest. Okay, and the last one, I'm really struggling here. And you hope that gradually over time, that routine becomes a habit. And there is a variable amount of time when a routine becomes a habit. It can be a matter of, in the least instance, I would say probably 10 days to 2 weeks of doing something, certainly by far the majority of the days. And for some things, it does take longer. So here I'm just being realistic with you, which is why I'm talking about not just about making habits, but making routines. And of course, as always, remembering, being mindful of the reward that you're going to get from it, either that extrinsic reward or an intrinsic one. So what about bad routines and habits? How on earth do you break those? So again, this is about self-reflection, because we have got this loop again, as always, the cue, the action, the actual behavior, the habit, and the reward that you get. So with regards to the cue, you need to really start noticing what the cue is that leads to the bad habit. Excuse me, sorry. So, and this will take quite possibly quite a bit of thought. What causes you to slip into, to default to that behavior that is a bad habit? And whether it is, I don't know, scrolling on social media, or if you absolutely love reading, whether it is just kind of going, oh, I'll just read a chapter of my book, whatever it is, something that actually is absolutely getting in the way of you working efficiently. So start noticing what that cue or the prompt is. And remember, it could be something that happens in the household. It could be something that somebody says. It could be a particular time of day when you are actually at your worst. So don't try and do really difficult work tasks when it is your worst time of day. Classic time would be the graveyard shift after lunch. Trying to get something done in your free period between 2 and 3 might always be nearly impossible. You might literally nearly always be nearly falling asleep over your work. Understand that. Don't beat yourself up for it, but rearrange your day's work so that actually that hour you can sit in the cafeteria and have your cup of tea, and you know that you did some in the morning, you did some in the evening, everything's sorted. So notice what the cue is. With regards to the action, we now need to think about, why did you do that particular reaction, that particular action, or that particular behavior? And notice we can apply this to any kind of habit, not just, defaulting and, oh, I'll just read a chapter of my book, or I'll just check Instagram, whatever. Why do you do that particular action? Is it because you get some self-validation? Is it that you're checking to see how many likes that you've got? Is it because you're just kind of wondering whether you just need a little bit of a break? Work out what it is and test it to see by possibly replacing your bad habit action with another behavior that seems more constructive. So if it is scrolling through Instagram and you're not, maybe you would then kind of say, oh, maybe I will just read 10 pages of my book, if it is about just giving my brain a little bit of a break. But if then that doesn't help you get on with work afterwards, you need to then rethink, well, am I actually doing this at the wrong time of the day? Rethink the routine. Yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense. And with regards to your reward, keep experimenting with different rewards that you give yourself to see which ones really do it for you. It's really possible, remember, that they will be extrinsic rewards when you are initially setting up that routine, you know, possibly merging into more intrinsic one if you get to the point where it actually becomes a habit. But I'm hoping that I have given you there a little bit of understanding about how routines, and if we really get into those routines then becoming habits, how those routines and habits can actually mean that our motivation gets translated into actual study time. So we talked about that cue, action, reward loop. We talked about that and how that keeps encouraging you in either good routines, habits, or bad routines or habits. And then we talked about some ideas as to how valuable just having a routine to parts of your day is. But you had the importance of that self-reflection, knowledge of yourself, honesty with yourself about which bits of the day you work well in, and therefore how you could change maybe when you do your hard bits of work, and using some of those tips to help put one habit, or the initiation of one routine, a new routine, onto the back of an old habit. So I use the example there of trying to learn formulae or particular definitions while you're just doing something mindless during the day, like making a bed or making your sandwiches for lunch or whatever it is. And then finally, we went through how you can try and relearn those bad habits. Thinking about the cue that actually kicks them off. Thinking about why you do the particular action that you do, and whether you couldn't replace it with something less bad. And then also experimenting with the rewards so that they really scratch where it itches, so that we can start really encouraging good routines and good behaviors. I hope that has been useful. So now just having a look at some of the questions and comments that you've got. Thank you very much for the encouraging comments, Divya and Amanda. Really good. Liam's asked a question: is biology better for medicine? If you're planning to do medicine, the one A level that is always requested, and I haven't checked every medical school in the last year or so, chemistry is the absolute essential. And then they require you often to have one other science, which could be biology, physics, maths, and then often any other subject. You clearly need to check the admission requirements for the medical schools that you're applying for. Biology has a very obvious relevance to medicine because we do so much animal biology, and therefore having an understanding as to how some aspects of animals work is obviously going to help you with your medicine. Amanda, so motivation has to be built from the way we organize our habits. So do you know, I think Amanda, I think they're absolutely linked. I think if you understand why you're doing the course that you want to do, and whether it be because you want to get to a particular uni, that's a classic one. So you're working towards getting those particular grades. I think that motivation should be the encouragement for you to set routines in place. But I think that in itself is a feedback loop, because if you can put good routines in place, it's a virtuous circle. When you see yourself learning and working effectively, you're encouraged by that, and therefore you carry on doing it. It is this whole feedback loop. Again, it's a positive feedback loop, just like the loop that I described, the cue, the action, the reward, oh crumbs, I'm getting the hang of this. I can absolutely tell you every bit of detail about DNA replication. Hey, I'm feeling good about that. Notice that that forms a virtuous circle that encourages you to keep on working. Yeah, once you've discovered efficient ways of working, they absolutely are the buzz that keep you working. I hope that helps, Amanda. KR, thank you for the thank you. Really appreciate that. Right, Nuno, sorry, you won't always be motivated. That's why you need to be. You know, I think that's absolutely true, Nuno. You know, and it is this balance. Here is, you know, I started off talking about motivation because that can be the thing that encourages a student to actually sit at their desk and doing something. But you're absolutely right. Discipline has to be in there as well. There's got to be discipline. To be honest, that's a life lesson. There are always going to be times when you don't want to do what you know you have to do, even when you know the positive outcome that will come of them. You know, that is where discipline kicks in. Absolutely right, Nina. Erin, thank you for the thank you. Really appreciate that, Amanda, and the same to you. If there aren't any more questions, I'm going to let you go and have your little break. Well done. And I will see you same time next week when I will start talking about some of those non-rocket science organizational things that you can do that help you with your work and get you working efficiently. I mentioned one of them, that whole idea of listing everything and then quickly prioritizing. We'll have a look at a few more of those next week. And I do just want to say as a last little thing that this is about, you don't have to have all of this stuff in place perfectly. We all go through life, muddling through life, doing everything a little bit imperfectly. So don't worry. That's why, you know, don't worry if you miss a day and you don't get it right and all the rest of it. It's all about understanding how you can keep moving forwards. And that's the plan, even if it isn't a nice, you know, beautiful upward trajectory. I don't think many of us do that. So, you know, be encouraged that every little bit is helping you to work effectively. And I hope that that has helped. And look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye for now. Thank you, Muna.